She had worn the faded gown because it was the best she had. This was the accounting of it, stripped of the specific humiliation that accompanied the accounting. The gown was 3 seasons old and had been altered twice to update it, and had been altered a 3rd time because the first 2 alterations had not entirely resolved the problem. And the result was something that was clean and pressed and carefully maintained, and that was, to anyone who knew fabric and fashion with the specific knowledge of people who made it their professional business, to know, clearly not current. She knew this. She had put it on anyway because the alternative was not attending, and not attending was its own statement, and she had decided at some point in the years since her father's ruin that she was not going to make the statement of absence. She was going to be present. She was going to hold her chin at the angle that did not invite pity, and she was going to manage the evening with the composed attention she brought to all the evenings she managed, which were the specific evenings of a woman who moved through a social world that had decided she was beneath it, without having the resources to force it to revise the decision. She had the dignity, she told herself, even when the dignity was all she had. It was some comfort on most evenings. On the evening of the Hartwell ball, which was the most exclusive event of the season and which she had attended because not attending would have confirmed what they all thought anyway, the comfort ran thin. But before we go into the ballroom, before we stand in the circle of people who have decided that cruelty is easier than indifference and are going to demonstrate this, I need to ask you something. If you were standing alone in the centre of a room while the world arranged itself around your isolation, what would you be thinking about? Would you be thinking about the people doing it? Or would you be thinking about how to survive the next 60 seconds with your dignity intact? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Clara was thinking about the 60 seconds. She was very good at 60 seconds. And then the doors opened. Subscribe and hit the bell. And tell me where you are watching from tonight. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. Lady Evelyn Cavendish had been the specific kind of beautiful since she was 16, the kind that was aware of itself and had organised its personality around the awareness. She was 24 now and had been the particular authority of the season's social hierarchy for 3 years, which was the specific authority of a woman who had found that cruelty, wielded with the right combination of beauty and social position, was a more reliable tool than almost anything else available to her. She picked targets with the specific deliberateness of someone who understood the craft of it. Not the powerful ones. The powerful ones could fight back, and fighting back was messy and damaged the instrument. Not the entirely invisible ones. There was a social benefit in targeting someone the room couldn't see. The targets were the ones in the middle. The ones who were present enough to be seen and vulnerable enough not to be defended. Clara Ashwell had been on the list since October, when the Ashwell finances had become the specific kind of public knowledge that made certain people visible in a new way. Not invisibly ruined, visibly ruined, which was the category that served Evelyn's purposes. She had been waiting for the right room and the right moment. The Hartwell ball was the right room. She had arranged it with the easy efficiency of someone who had done this before. A word to the right people, a shift in the social geography of the ballroom during a moment when the musicians were between pieces and the conversations had the particular charged quality of rooms between activities. Clara had been near the east side of the floor, which was not ideal positioning, and Evelyn had simply been in the current that moved her toward the centre. By the time Clara understood the current, she was in the centre of it. Evelyn smiled. "Lady Clara," she said, with the warmth of a woman performing warmth for an audience. The audience was present, the specific cluster of women who followed Evelyn's lead, and the men who watched from slightly further out, and the broader room, that had the quality of a crowd that has become aware something is happening and has oriented toward it. What a lovely evening. Clara looked at her. She had the chin at the angle. She was doing the 60 seconds. Lady Evelyn, she said. I was just saying to Charlotte how brave it is, Evelyn said, in the tone that was not describing bravery, to attend something like this. When one's circumstances have become, she paused with the specific precision of someone who had chosen the pause, so reduced. The crowd had the quality of people who were going to let this happen. Clara was aware of this. She had been aware of it since the moment the current had moved her here. She was doing the specific calculus of a woman who had been in this situation before. Not exactly this situation, but the family of situations, the category of evenings that required the management of being made small in public. She was counting 60 seconds and then 60 more, and she was not going to cry in this room. Your gown is charming, Evelyn said, and the word charming had the specific quality of charming when it was not a compliment. In a nostalgic way, the cluster laughed. Look at you, Clara. The voice was carrying now, which was the intention. The room was the audience, and Evelyn was performing for the room. Your dress belongs in the last decade, and your name is worth nothing. She looked at Clara with the specific quality of a woman who has decided to finish the thing she started. No one wants to dance with you. No one wants to look at you. A pause. In fact, nobody wants you. The room made the sound of a room that has been given permission to find something funny. The crowd stepped back. It was a small movement, individual, each person's private adjustment, but the collective result was unmistakable. Clara was in the centre of a circle, and the circle was defined by the people who had stepped back to define it, and she was alone in it. She was not going to cry. She was looking for the exit. The doors opened, not the ordinary way that doors opened at events. The specific way that large ballroom doors opened when the person coming through them had the quality that made rooms reorganize. The sound of it was the sound of the room's ambient noise stopping, which was the specific collective response of 300 people registering an arrival and revising what they had been doing. She did not know he was there until she heard the stopping. She looked up. Duke Alistair Pemberton was not supposed to attend the Hartwell Ball. This was known. His attendance or non-attendance at events was a kind of social weather, tracked and noted and discussed in advance, and the Hartwell Ball had been categorized as an event he would not attend. She had heard this at the beginning of the evening in the specific way that one heard things at these events, and she had not thought about it again because the Duke of Pemberton's social calendar was not something she had particular reason to think about. He was here. He had come through the doors and the room had stopped making its ambient noise, and he was standing with the quality she had heard described and had, on the 3 occasions she had been in his proximity, observed for herself. The quality of a man who had the specific authority of someone who had never needed to perform authority because it was simply there. He was dark-haired, which she registered. He was taller than most of the men in the room, which she registered. He had the cold, precise features that the room described as handsome, and that she had observed from a respectful distance as genuinely that. He stood at the entrance, and his eyes moved across the room. She watched him see the situation. She had the experience of watching people see the situation. Most of them registered it with the specific quality of people who were deciding it was not their concern. The eyes touched it and moved on. The filing was done. The decision was made. This was what rooms did. This was what she had learned about rooms. His eyes did not move on. She watched him assess. The speed of the assessment was notable. Not the casual scanning of a man looking for someone he knew, but the specific rapid reading of a man who was trained to read situations and was reading this one. She watched him look at Evelyn. She watched him look at the circle. She watched him look at her. She did not know what he saw. She knew what was there to see. The faded gown and the chin at the angle and the tears that she was absolutely not going to let fall, and the specific quality of a woman who was managing the next 60 seconds. He began walking. He walked through the crowd the way he had come through the doors, with the quality of a man moving through a space that was reorganizing itself ahead of him rather than a man navigating a space. People stepped aside. She was not certain they were aware they were doing it. It was the specific effect of a particular kind of presence. He did not look at Evelyn. He did not look at the cluster. He walked directly to her. He stopped in front of her. She was looking up at him, and he was looking at her. And the room was the specific silence of 300 people not making a sound, which she was distantly aware of in the way that she was distantly aware of the floor under her feet and the air in her lungs. Present, necessary, not the primary thing. He bowed. Not the social bow of an introduction. Something lower and slower, and with the specific quality of a gesture that had been chosen rather than performed. "Lady Clara," he said. His voice was what she had heard described, and had heard from across rooms, and had not heard at this distance. It was the specific carrying quality of a voice that did not need to be raised to fill a space. It was, she thought, one of the more remarkable things she had encountered in the season's worth of evenings she had managed. "I have searched the entire length of this kingdom," he said, "for a woman of true grace. The room was not breathing, and I find her standing here." She was looking at him, and he was looking at her, and something was happening that she did not have immediate words for, which was unusual because she was generally a woman who had words. "I would be the most honoured man in England," he said, "if you would grant me the first dance." She stood in the circle that had been made of her isolation, and she looked at the Duke of Pemberton, who had walked through 300 people to stand in front of her, and bow lower than she had been told. He bowed for anyone. And she felt something happen that she had been managing against for the better part of the season. She felt the dignity hold. Not crack. Hold. Hold in the specific way it held when something confirmed it rather than threatened it. She put her hand in his. He led her to the floor. Before he turned fully toward her, he looked back at the room. She saw this from beside him. Not a long look. Not a performance of intimidation. The specific, measured look of a man who is communicating something with complete efficiency and is aware that the communication requires only the look. The room received it. She saw Evelyn's face receive it. She looked away from Evelyn's face because the rest of the evening was not about Evelyn's face. He turned to her. "Can you waltz?" he said. The question was practical and direct, and she found, in the practicality of it, something that was easier to manage than the declaration had been. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said, and his hand was at her waist, and they were moving. He was, she discovered, an excellent dancer. This surprised her, though she could not have articulated why. Perhaps because the qualities she had observed from across rooms were not the qualities she associated with dancing, which required a specific kind of presence in the body rather than in the authority of a room. He was present in both ways, which was its own quality. "You are counting," he said. She looked at him. "Pardon." "In your head," he said. "You have been counting since before I arrived, 60 seconds at a time." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Is it working?" he said. "It was working," she said. "Your arrival complicated the method." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, exactly, the approach of one. "I apologize for the disruption," he said. "I will attempt to be less disruptive in future." She looked at him. "You are not less disruptive," she said, "as a general category." "No," he said, "I am not." They danced. She was aware of the room, aware of it in the specific way of someone who has been at the centre of its attention in two very different registers within the space of 20 minutes. The attention was different now. She could not see the individual expressions, but she could feel the quality of the room's orientation, which had the quality of rooms receiving information they were still processing. "You were not supposed to attend tonight," she said. "No," he said. Did you know I would be here? A pause. I knew you had been invited, he said. I knew you generally attended events to which you were invited. I do not find avoidance a sustainable strategy. She looked at him. Neither do I, she said, the approach of the smile again. No, he said. I observed that. They danced in silence for a moment. The music was good, which she had not particularly choosed before, and the floor had the specific quality of a floor that was well maintained, and she was dancing with the Duke of Pemberton, who had walked through a room to her, and the evening had reorganized entirely from what it had been 40 minutes ago. You do not belong in the dirt with these wolves, Clara. He said it quietly, in the way of something he was saying because it was true, rather than because it was for the room. His voice at this register was different, still the carrying quality, but the carrying was inward rather than outward. She heard her name in his voice, and felt something she was going to have to address later. When she was not dancing with the Duke of Pemberton, and was somewhere she could do the addressing privately. I have not been in the dirt, she said. He looked at her. You have been managing, he said. Yes, she said. There is a difference, he said, and you know it. She looked at the floor. I know it, she said. You belong with me, he said. She looked up. He was looking at her with the quality she had not seen him from across rooms. The specific quality of a man who has said something he means and is looking at the person he has said it to and is not managing the expression. She had no immediate response to this. He seemed to understand that she had no immediate response and did not press for one. They finished the dance. He led her from the floor with his hand at the small of her back, which was a touch that was correct and appropriate, and that was also, in its specific warmth, something she was going to put in the category of things to address later. He walked her to the edge of the room. He procured her a glass of champagne, with the efficiency of a man who had done this before, in the sense of procuring things, and not in the sense of doing this specifically. And he stood beside her, and the room arranged itself at the appropriate distance, and Evelyn was visible across the room, with the specific quality of a woman who is assessing the dimensions of what has just happened. She was not laughing. Clara held her champagne. Thank you, she said. Don't, he said. She looked at him. I don't want your gratitude, he said. That is not what I came for. What did you come for? She said. He looked at her with the direct quality of a man who had decided on honesty and found it more efficient than the alternative. You, he said. She was going to need significantly more time to address later than she had initially estimated. The morning after produced the specific London social activity of the Ton, receiving new information and redistributing its alliances accordingly. She was not present for most of this. She was at her modest rooms in the Kensington house where she lived with her aunt, who was a practical woman, Anne, who managed their reduced circumstances with the same composed efficiency that Clara had learned from her, and who heard the account of the previous evening and said, with the brevity of someone who considered excessive commentary inefficient, "He sounds decisive." "He is decisive," Clara said. "Is he decent?" She thought about the approach of the smile, the quiet voice. You do not belong in the dirt with these wolves. The way he had looked at the room before turning back to her, and the specific quality of that look, which had been about her rather than about the room. I believe so, she said. Then pay attention, her aunt said. Decisive and decent is not a common combination. You have been paying attention to the wrong things for long enough. Clara went to the window. Outside, Kensington was doing what it did in the mornings. It was the ordinary business of a city that had no particular awareness of what had happened in the Hartwell ballroom the previous evening. The city was always doing this, being ordinary while things happened inside it that were not ordinary. She found it usually comforting. She found it this morning slightly beside the point. She was thinking about the waltz. She was thinking, specifically, about the quality of being seen, not the seeing of a room that had looked at her last night and had found her a useful target. The other kind, the kind that Alistair Pemberton had directed at her, with the specific deliberateness of a man who had decided to look and was looking fully. She had not been looked at fully in a very long time. She had managed without it, because managing was what she did. And the managing had produced a specific version of herself that was competent and composed, and kept her chin at the right angle, and she was not going to apologize for the version. But the version had a cost, which was the cost of managing everything, which was that you were always the one holding the 60 seconds together, and never the one for whom someone else was counting. He called the next day. This was not unusual in the social mechanics of courtship. Calls were the appropriate mechanism, and it was also, she understood, not the usual thing, because the Duke of Pemberton calling the day after a ball was not the usual thing, and she was aware of this. He came to the Kensington house with the specific quality she had seen at the ball, which was the quality that was simply there rather than performed. And her aunt let him in with the brevity of a woman who had assessed the situation and reached her conclusions. He sat across from Clara in the small drawing room of the Kensington house, which was a modest room with good light and furniture that had been maintained carefully across the years of reduced circumstances. And he looked at the room with the attending quality and said nothing about the modesty of it. "I want to ask you something," he said. "You may ask," she said. "Last night," he said, "before I arrived, were you going to leave?" She considered this. "I was looking for the exit," she said. "I had not decided whether to use it." "What decided you against it?" he said. She looked at the window. "Leaving," she said, would have been an answer to the question they were asking, which was whether I belonged there. I did not want to give them the answer. He was quiet. "You were going to stay in that circle," he said, "on principle." "I was going to manage the next 60 seconds on principle," she said. "And then the 60 after that. And if I hadn't come, I would have managed until the evening was over," she said. "And I would have gone home. And I would have been in this room this morning instead of this conversation." He looked at her. "And the gown," he said, "you wore it deliberately." She looked at him. "I wore it because it was the best I had." "I know," he said. "I am asking if you were aware of what wearing it was going to cost you and wore it anyway." She looked at the window. "Yes," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I have been watching you," he said, "for longer than last night." She looked at him. "Several months," he said. "In the way of someone who is at the same events and is attending to what is in the room. I have watched you manage things that most people would have found unmanageable, with the chin at the correct angle." A pause. "I have found it. I have found you notable." She was looking at him. He was looking back. "Notable," she said. "The specific quality," he said, "of a person who has decided who they are and has not permitted the room to revise the decision." He held her gaze. "I have encountered very few people of that quality. I have encountered none who were doing it in a faded gown, in hostile company, with the composure you were maintaining." She was quiet. "I said last night that you belonged with me," he said. "I want to be clear about what I meant by that, because I do not say things I do not mean, and I would not have you misunderstand the intention." "What did you mean?" she said. "I meant," he said, "that the qualities you have, the ones you have maintained without support or recognition or any external confirmation of their worth, are the qualities that I have been looking for in a person to share my life with. Not a social arrangement, not the administrative efficiency of a well-managed household." He looked at her with the direct quality. "A person, specifically you." She sat with this. "You are proposing," she said. "I am proposing the beginning of something that would lead to a proposal," he said. "I am not a man who moves carelessly. I am asking whether the beginning is something you are willing to consider." She looked at the room. The modest drawing room with the carefully maintained furniture and the good light and the specific quality of a life managed well under difficult circumstances. She thought about the ball, about the circle and the 60 seconds and the doors opening. She thought about the waltz and "You do not belong in the dirt with these wolves" and the approach of the smile. She thought about what her aunt had said. Decisive and decent is not a common combination. She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "I am willing to consider the beginning." The approach of the smile arrived at its destination. It was, she thought, an excellent destination, weeks later. The Thornfield estate was everything the Blackthorn name implied, in terms of the specific kind of wealth that had been in a family long enough to stop being about wealth and start being about the particular quality of things that had endured. The stone and the grounds and the specific patina of a house that had been significant for 300 years and knew it without requiring the knowing to be announced. She had come at his invitation. She was standing in the garden, which was the October garden, past the summer's best, the specific honest beauty of things that are what they are rather than what they had been, and he came to stand beside her. "They said nobody wanted you," he said. She looked at the garden. "They were right," he said. She looked at him. "You were meant only for me," he said. She stood in the October garden of Thornfield Estate, in the faded gown that she had worn deliberately, and she looked at the Duke of Pemberton, who had walked through a room to find her. And she felt the specific quality of the dignity, not cracking, but expanding. She had managed 60 seconds at a time for 3 years of reduced circumstances and hostile rooms. She had been managing toward this, she thought, without knowing it. The managing had not been let waste. It had been the specific work of becoming a person who could stand in the center of a circle and not break, and could, when the doors opened and the room reorganized, receive what was offered with the full quality of herself, rather than the diminished version that difficulty sometimes produced. "That is," she said, "a great deal to claim." "I am aware," he said. "I generally don't claim things I can't support." "And can you support it?" she said. He looked at her with a look that was not managed. "I intend to spend considerable time demonstrating it," he said. "If you'll allow me." She looked at the garden. She thought about the portrait that would hang in the grand hall, not because she was thinking about portraits, she was not, but because there was something in the moment that had the quality of things that were going to endure, the specific quality of a foundation being laid. She turned to him. "Begin demonstrating," she said. He reached into his coat. The ring was old gold with a stone she recognized as belonging to the category of things that had been in families long enough to stop being about the stone and start being about what the stone represented. She looked at it. She looked at him. "Lady Clara," he said, with the same voice that had filled a ballroom on a Tuesday in October, with the specific carrying quality of something that did not need to be raised to fill a space. "Will you marry me?" She had managed 60 seconds at a time for 3 years. She was done managing. "Yes," she said, "I will." He put the ring on her finger. The October garden held the moment with the specific indifference of things that have been standing for 300 years and have seen considerable events, and find this one neither more nor less remarkable than the others, which was its own kind of witness, the witness of endurance rather than occasion. She was going to be the Duchess of Pemberton. The people who had laughed were going to find out about this, the way they found out about most things of significance. Too late to have had any influence on it, from sources that would make certain they understood exactly what they had failed to recognize when it was standing in front of them in a faded gown. She was not going to think about that for very long. She was going to think about the garden and the ring and the man beside her, who had been watching her manage 60 seconds at a time from across rooms and had come through a ballroom door to make the 60 seconds unnecessary. The stone the builders rejected, she thought. She had been the stone. She was going to be the cornerstone. Tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you? Was it the circle in the ballroom, the bow, the waltz, and the 60 seconds, or the garden at Thornfield? Drop it below. I want to know what you're carrying from this one. And tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell. Because the next story opens with a woman who walks into a room expecting to be overlooked and discovers that the most dangerous man in the room has been waiting specifically for her. I'll see you there.